Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. So previously, we discussed the benefits of submitting your work, right? Whether it be poetry, short stories, art, photography, to lit mags, journals, and presses, right? And mainly, I was just trying to state it's a opportunity or a way to create more opportunities for yourself if your work ends up getting accepted over time to multiple places. It can expose you to new doorways, new pathways. You may end up working for a lit mag or journal, when they have, let's say, openings, or they recognize your name and things like that. And, some of us who've submitted to like our lit mag, right, Dippity, I said we had volunteer staff. I've seen fellow poets in the community run workshops after getting their work out there, and acceptances and having eyes on it. They got more and more exposure. They run workshops that are about, a couple $100 even. And some of them have gone on to win contests that were, several $100s or several $1,000s in cash awards and things like that. There are cases like that. Not everyone's going to get paid for their work, right? And it happens. And again, rejections are always bound to happen, as I mentioned in the past episode. So again, you really have to be passionate about, the literary arts world overall if you're going to, do it. You have to not give up so easily, right? You have to keep going and going and going. So I want to discuss in this episode, what happens, if you can't get your work accepted anywhere and it's been, let's say several years, right? Or you've gotten rejected from nearly every single place you've submitted to, and it's been such a long time, and your work is just not going anywhere. And yeah, so I would say it is so important to keep trying, even if it's been several years, never give up. If there's a place you really want to get into, keep trying. I've heard stories of poets who submitted 30, 40, 50 times to places, and they finally got into this place they were trying to submit to. So it takes time, but by all means, you should not wait, though, to get your work out there. I would say, what I do, I'll share, for example, for all of the work that I get rejected, what I do, sometimes I just compile them into random collections and publish them to put them out there, whether it be an ebook, whether it be a print publication, just get it out there, right? Just end up self-publishing all of your poems that got rejected, putting them into a collection. And sometimes, someone may come across it. Some others, may read it. I've had poets that can purchase those collections. Sometimes they absolutely love some of the poems in them, and some of them they perhaps didn't understand fully. Some of them are absolutely random, and some of them actually come from honest, true stories and events in my life. So it's a mixture. I compiled all of them, just because, I couldn't find homes for them. And I had also, a lot of just writing, just sitting over time. And I decided just, to get it out there. What I see poets do in the community even is they share perhaps tidbits of their work out on social media or into some other places. Like there's a few app spaces for poets, right, and community spaces. I'll perhaps cover this a little bit more in other episodes, but there are some out there where you can like publish your poem in the community space, get feedback on it from there, or some of them even go out to like mobile apps even and things like that. So, I would just recommend, getting your work out there yourself, do a self-publication. I mean, it's going to cost you very little to do so, to do a self-publication. There are some print-on-demand spaces you can go through and have it published in a very short amount of time. Of course, you need to come up with a cover, but you can always, do a 2.0 version of the book at later point, refine it, comb it after feedback and getting it out there, and do a new cover, right? It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. I try to do my cover design myself, or sometimes I will try to go for my budget to do things with covers, but I try to do just some basic cover design myself, like and collage art and stuff like that. So, a self-publication isn't really going to cost you much. If you want to put it into, the Ingram network or have it available for bookstores to buy, then you might have a few other fees there and things or tacked on. It depends which space you go to. Like they have different listing fees for publications. Some usually they're just one-time fees, and then sometimes places have revision fees. So keep that in mind. But ebooks are easy to put up, and you can self-publish all of that poetry that rejected, all your short stories into a book. Don't just let it sit and collect dust. You don't know who it may impact, especially if you're focusing on absolutely true events in your life and things that you absolutely care about. Put it out there. Again, it may absolutely resonate with someone, or they may connect with your work, right? I've had publications I thought literally no one would ever, even spoken word stuff, no one would ever really hear. But I had come across a small group of women who had, actually connected with my spoken word on stuff in perhaps the medical world, I'll say, experiences there. And they actually quoted me and things like that. So I think that was out on TikTok or something, a few reels before they discontinued some of the things I put out there in certain spaces, because they, things change with publication spaces and what they allow out there and not. But it's still out there, in other spaces where others can listen and hear it, quite a few. So just put your work out there. I'd recommend as many spaces possible, like self-publish it all. Don't wait like 10, 20 years to get your work out there, because, as we often say, life is short, tomorrow's never guaranteed. If you have a bunch of work sitting, it does you no good to have it collect dust or stored in an attic or tossed away in a journal, just like collecting dust. So it may absolutely, form more connections with others' community if you start getting your work out there. Put it out on a Substack, or, start a blog. I've seen writers start WordPress sites and stuff and blogs or Substacks, and some poets have started, monotonizing their Substacks and things like that, and gradually doing releases like that, or sharing half free, half non-free posts and things like that. So you never know, you may gain traction that way versus submitting to a lit mag or press directly. Some pieces may never find homes, right? So don't just give up on them and let them, be tossed away. You can do something with those works. You can, repurpose them into a new collection, or put them in a publication that others can buy and purchase. And, there may be cases where no one comes across that publication for a long time too, but at least it's out there, at least it's available, right? And it's not just sitting. So yeah, you can take your rejected work, put it on, T-shirts even, or something. Come up with some fun repurposing of it. I've seen poets put quotes of their poetry on T-shirts and things like that and sell those. I mean, you could do that. I mean, so much you could do. You can turn it all into spoken word pieces, if it's all in, change the format of it and see others' reaction. There's a lot of things, creative projects you can do with your rejected work per se. You can, you can flip it around. So don't just let your work sit there, Nevertheless, though, if you face a lot of rejections, you may want to look at getting feedback from others in the community, close friends, and maybe even try briefly doing one of the feedback options a lit mag or journal has, and then go from there. And it may help you. It may help you revise your work further and think about, of course, sometimes, critiques, right? We don't always agree with them, right? And it happens, right? But sometimes you should always take into consideration, constructive criticism, not like don't look at comments and things on your work online and things where it says, sometimes you'll come across others who just say some really nasty things. It happens, or I don't know what this is about at all. This makes no bloody sense. This work is bullshit, right? You may get a review on your book one day saying this was written by a child, or this sucks, right? It's gonna happen to you, right? I've had others review works that I wrote in high school, even out of the blue. Of course, it's not gonna get a high rating. Of course, that was like much earlier work, but I really used to take it too personally when others would give me 1 star, and I was just like, whatever now. I just leave everything up because I don't really care anymore, A rating does not define you, right? And, reviews, honestly, when you get a positive review, obviously you're going to feel good, right? But, not everyone's going to resonate with your work, okay? You're not going to make everyone happy that comes into contact with work. They may not understand it until, perhaps more and more of like, let's say you write a bunch of poetry and then, poetry is oftentimes considered quite abstract in nature, or some poets' work is cryptic. And let's say you come out with a memoir later on and it pieces together like moments of your life, and then maybe others tie back to things. Some poets, is what I'm saying, they include like memoirs or additional photographs or things beside their poetry, like telling a story. Whatever you do publish, if it's more so on a random collection, it may not resonate with others. What I've seen is that, things that are more focused, themed, essentially seem to grab others more so. That's not necessarily the case. Certainly some random collections may have some amazing pieces across the board from start to finish. So it really depends, right? What I'm saying is just get your work out there as soon as possible and do it. Don't wait. Do not wait, and do not let it sit, because you'll have regrets. Like, even with art, right? You just have all this art sitting at home doing nothing. And, you see other artists sharing their work. And, even if it's not like thousands of people buying your work or sales like that, you got your work out there. It takes a lot of courage to do so, to even self-publish. So you have to be so vulnerable and open to be able to do that. And it's hard, right? Especially some poems that are on the true side, not fiction, right? Nonfiction writing is so hard. And sharing parts of yourself and your life, because some of us, absolutely have been put through the ringer, right, in our life, and, ups and downs, and sharing those very personal moments through, whether it be a bite-sized poem or a short story or little tidbits of it. It is very tough to do so, to share those moments in writing form, right? So it takes a lot of courage. So, once you start getting your work out there, it feels less and less painful. So I would say it's like that saying, right? Rip the Band-Aid off, get it done and over with, and then do it more and more, and it becomes easier and easier and easier to share. And you may start to connect with others. And that's the beautiful thing about not just poetry, but writing, art in general, right? Forming connections with fellow human beings. And And, nearly all writers in the world, I'm sure you've heard the stories, right? Not just poets or short story writers, but a lot of the books we have come to love and known, series even, they were on the verge of giving up, and they faced so many rejections. They were on the verge of like completely tossing their story idea in the trash, or all the characters and everything that we've come to love and known, right? But they ended up getting it out there, coming across others who believed in their work, who stood by them, got acceptances, and got their work, published. It just took a long time, an awful long time. And, so it's the importance of not giving up. It's, there's several examples in history and time, of authors who were on the verge of giving up and didn't. And they eventually, got their work out there, and it actually, resonated with millions of readers, to their surprise, and thousands of people. So you never know the outcome, when you share your work. That's what I'm saying. So it does not hurt to try. As I always say, it does not hurt to keep trying. If you keep trying and trying and trying, that's doing something, right? You're not doing nothing. And so you may be surprised, by what happens by sharing your work. And if a bunch of people say your work sucks, don't take it to heart. Don't, because it doesn't. You invested time into it. You love it. That's what matters, right? You're proud of your work. Pay no mind to all of the, so many negative comments. Really look at constructive criticism when it comes to your work, ways to improve it, and do revisions, do 2.0 versions, and go from there. So, if your work ends up getting not placed anywhere for a very long time, start sharing it out gradually in tidbits, pieces, put together a collection. Just be mindful on social media, right? Things you have to be mindful and careful about is that, like AI stuff, right? Some platforms have like a thing to opt out of AI, scanning, or like AI collections and stuff. Like I think Substack has that option, and what a lot of writers are running into nowadays is that, AI content scraping, over art and writing. And I think that's so disrespectful and hurtful to artists and writers. I think, on Instagram, that's an issue, right? Obviously. And there's like some spaces where they are totally against that, right? So be mindful about that. I mean, there's really AI is everywhere nowadays. There's nothing really we can do, right? It's an uphill battle for artists against technology. But there are cases where artists have taken technology to new heights, right? And things like that. But I think in terms of the poetry and art space, I think that whole thing about combing through existing artist work and recreating it, and it's really detrimental, right, to the art and writing world. And in some cases, it can be just really gut-wrenching, like if an artist sees their work was like repurposed in the form of AI, right, and just like replicated, it is very hurtful, right? And it takes an artist or even a writer sometimes several hundred hours or a lot of time to even create that from scratch, and think about a machine making it in a matter of minutes or seconds over them. Yeah, so anyways, when you post your work on social media, just keep that in mind. Like there's that whole AI content scraping, thing. Some places like have an opt-out thing where don't include this in AI, or opt out of AI, when you're doing things like that. And a lot of lit mags and journals you'll come across, they say no AI works, right? None. Things like that. Some places do outright say, if you are using any AI, whether to create a piece of anything, that you be outright upfront with them. There are some AI checkers out there, some advanced scans and checkers that some journals and presses uses, plagiarism checkers and things like that. AI checkers, was this creative AI to scan and deep dive analysis, right? There's some ones out there. But anyways, yeah. So just keep that in mind. Wherever you share your work, like on social media, I've come across poets who have had their work lifted or by others, and stealing and stolen work. It happens. So that's one reason why some poets don't share on social media, because those things happen, right? Others not giving credit for your work, or not doing spin-offs of your work and not putting after this poet, or this was inspired by this poet. Because you can totally tell sometimes when poets, were leveraging very distinct, unique titles or works of yours and doing spin-offs of them and not even mentioning your name, hey, I was inspired to do this piece after hearing it from this poet, or, that, rather than outright, doing something very close to it or near match, right? Or outright stealing your work. And obviously that is so wrong. So that's something that, worries a lot of poets, their work getting stolen, right, off places. And a lot of lit mags and journals often run into cases, where there are some fraudulent accounts, right, or others who are just like sending in works that aren't theirs and things like that. There's a lot of horrible theft in the world of writing, in the writing space. And oftentimes it's not quite bit till after that others become aware of that. Sometimes they don't catch it right away, so it's very tough. But anyways, things like that happen, and you have to stay on top of it and things like that, so just be mindful wherever you share your work. Make sure that you outright put your terms upon sharing, and your sharing permissions and things like that. Give some looks at what some other poets are doing, like in their ebooks and the sharing permissions and stuff. Usually there's a little blurb on like, no part of this book may be shared without permission. On social media, some poets have a little highlight, which states their terms and conditions of sharing, or they have a pinned post. But oftentimes, it's some poets will say ask before sharing and things like that. So be mindful about that too. There are some, things like, for example, some places, and I started a podcast, right? Hummingbird Blink was initially like a place where I just would, during like the pandemic and stuff, just start sharing poetry that resonated with me from Instagram and sharing and just reading, right? And things like that. So I was very mindful to double check accounts and things to do that, about sharing permissions. Sometimes I outright ask poets. Other times I read and shared, and I shared the episode with them. anyone ever had an issue with anything, of course, I would not include them. But sometimes poets change their mind and I re-included them. They wanted to be in the episode. So, you have to be mindful about, what permissions you're giving others with your work, when you put it out there, right? Can they read it? Can they share it? As long as they credit your name, I'm typically okay as long as others always include my name or give some credit to, the inspiration behind their work. If it was a spin-off or something, it's cool to see poets get inspired by fellow poets, right? As long as they mention that it came from your work rather than saying this was my idea, right? I did it all on my own, and I think it is so important that, poets do that is a sense of community when you do inspired pieces from one another, right? That you say after this poet, after that poet, or after this poem title, right? We see that in the poetry world all the time of older, from poets doing spin-off pieces of poets who have been in existence a long time, whether it be Emily Dickinson or, Edgar Allan Poe, poets, after this poet, the title and things, mentioning that is so important, right? So anyways, a lot to take into consideration, but there's not much we can do about AI. Who knows what it's going to look like several decades from now with that whole AI, and all of that stuff. There are so many lawsuits against AI nowadays and things happening there. So, So I personally love traditional art, traditional writing. Past 5 years or so, I haven't been able to do drawing because of some physical challenges I'm personally dealing with. So the most I could do was, starting this lit mag and writing and doing some tech articles and support now and then. Nothing too physically strenuous, So and podcasting and sharing here. So So I totally recommend, if you're a writer, an artist, get your work out there, start getting out there, you may have to try different platforms. You may have to try a couple different platforms before you find the space you really love, but don't always rely on just one platform to share your work, right? Because if that dissolves or goes away, then, right, so I always recommend, making sure your work is available in more than one format, if you're going to share it out, digital and print, it's always a good idea to do both. And so, if no place wants your work, start publishing it yourself. That's the way to go, just start getting it out there and keep going at it. And, you can still submit to places while that's happening, while you're sharing. You can create new works and keep trying to get into some lit mags or journals that you are a fan of, or follow, that seem pretty cool. You can still keep trying, don't give up. So that's all I'd say. So next episode, I'll think of a topic and I'll come up with something. One PS note, guys, real quick. So I just want to reiterate again, there are a lot of really cool ways you can share your work and distribute it out there, right? You could set up a website, start selling it off your own shop, start promoting it, It's going to take a lot of legwork to do that, but it's totally possible. You just got to keep going at it, right? If you never try, you'll never know. It's so true, so just keep going at it and see the results. I personally, I've said probably about a couple hundred books. Most of them are ones I wasn't technically really proud of, per se. I was going through quite a few things personally, physically, and it's not my best work, per se. If I had taken more time, wasn't in as much pain, I probably would have had things cleaned up much more, worked with artist or more artists for my own projects, personally, and even include my own drawings, but I did not get the opportunity to do so yet because physically, I used to draw a lot. And you can save a lot of money by doing your own illustration work and stuff like that, and I would have loved to had my drawings side by side, every single poem I ever did and things like that, but not able to still. So consider the ways you can be cost efficient, in terms of distributing and sharing your work. There are a lot of free platforms you can leverage. Just be very careful on, again, your sharing permissions of other, others who come into contact with your work. Make sure it's very clear somewhere. And of course, your work is copyrighted and stuff. It's your work, right? So just be very careful. It happens, others stealing others' work from offline, pulling it. So it's always a good idea to have your work in more than one place. Don't just be reliant on one publishing platform, branch out. Have backup copies always of your work, and be just careful, yeah? And in terms of, I mentioned some publishers and places being fake or false or basically pop-up shops. So yeah, there are absolutely some red flags when it comes to lit mags and journals, right? Most obvious, right? A lot of the ones with with insanely high astronomical fees, right? Too, it is a red flag, right? I mean, consider like I think for one poetry submission, I did end up footing $20. It was like an iPhone challenge. The poem had to fit an iPhone screen. I think it was with Narrative magazine. They've been around a long time. A lot of poets actually still submit to them. Their fees are very, very high, and most are aware of Narrative magazine. I'm not saying Narrative magazine does a poor job of anything. It's been around a long time. I think it's just concerning, like how high the fees are, and everything. I don't know what their costs are for maintaining Narrative magazine or anything, but I think it's kind of way too high for that. I think it'd make more sense if their print publications were $20 or more, but not like the fee to submit for just general poetry. That's just way too high. That's out of most people's ballpark for submitting, consider you could submit to so many places with that $20, right? And there, again, I'd recommend focusing on fee-free places first, then slowly maybe try a place here and there that has reasonably low fees. I mean, it's hard to get around fees nowadays. Nearly most publications have it, and I'd prefer to be completely fee-free at Dippity, but, we don't have any sufficient funding. We don't have a readily supportive backing or anything like that, and I truly wish it could be 100% fee-free. And maybe one day we will absolutely be able to. Hopefully, I do want to. So, and pay writers for the work. I think that's so important. So, a lot of poets, it's only natural for poets to want to be paid for their work, any human being, so that's typically the types of publications, your eye goes for first. But, if you get accepted into some of the publications that are perhaps lesser known or haven't been around as long, that's still a huge accomplishment. It is very tough to get work accepted, no matter what, and it's achievement. Share that with your fam and friends. I mean, if your friends and family or your family doesn't care about poetry, I mean, there's not much you can do. Not everyone likes poetry. My folks especially don't like poetry, but they, have always been supportive of, my cartooning days and like things I do, but they always considered everything as a hobby because, of course, it doesn't earn a salary, right? Again, some poets and writers, artists even, some of them do make full-time livings off their writing and art, and, not everyone's gets to that point. So, whatever you're passionate about, just keep trying and see where it goes, right? It doesn't hurt to try. You never know what your journey would be like. Everyone's journey in the art and writing world's a little bit, it's not exactly the same. We have some of the same hurdles, right? Rejections and writer's block I mentioned and things like that. A lot of commonalities amongst us as writers and artists. And but I think the whole point of art and writing is to share, to make an impact, or to share who, you don't necessarily have to share who you are in your poetry work, but I think it's meaningful when you actually share things that actually happened or you felt, or you try to have a purpose around your work, like to make other days brighter, to share things about mental health awareness or awareness on certain topics, or, it can be healing even to others, right? Poetry, I mentioned this on our Hummingbird Blink podcast. It can be like yoga. Poetry can be yoga for some, or a form of meditation, expression, and release. So it doesn't necessarily have to be for others, right? It could be just for you, and you're sharing. It helps you, and no matter whether 10,000 people read it or not, sharing your work, it helps you, getting it out there gradually, not just letting it rot away. Don't let your work rot away. That's all I'd say. Yeah. So, that's all. Now officially take care, guys. Signing off for this episode. Yeah.